Thanks for listening today to Ag PhD Radio. Got a little bit of time yet. If you want to call in, it's 844-44-AG-PhD. So we've been talking a little bit about irrigation today. We're going to continue that right now. We've got Mike Mills on with us. He's with Renke. Hey, Mike, how are you?
I'm great. It's a pleasure to be on with you this afternoon.
Okay, so here's my first question. I don't know if you heard this. Right before the break, the farmer just asked, okay, I got soybeans. I'm irrigating. Am I ahead to irrigate with a lower volume more often, or should I put an inch on and then let things dry out just a little bit? What do you think?
Well, your response to him was looking at the white mold, and certainly that's an issue that needs to be taken into account. If you don't have any disease or fertilizer pressure, then you want to take a look at what your management practice is inside the root zone. The goal is to keep the moisture in that root zone where that plant is drawing that from. So keeping a shallow application, a shallow frequent application is going to keep that moisture higher in the soil but lose some more to evaporation. A deeper application is going to give you more of a longer reservoir, if you will, until you need to do your next water application. So it really kind of depends on your weather forecast, your soil management style, and your soil structure. If your soil just can't hold the water, if you have a sandier soil where that water is just going to flow on through, then you're kind of forced into a lighter frequent application. But with a heavier soil that can hold it, then you can manage that root zone depth as you're managing your weather and your forecast natural rainfall, and then, as you were mentioning, taking into account whatever other pressures you might have.
Yeah, I had 10 seconds to answer that question, so I didn't have a lot of time to explain anything. But when he was specifically asking about white mold, it's like, okay, well, without knowing his soil or anything else, we do know that white mold needs moisture in there. And if we can get that soil in good shape and down deep, okay, we're fine. But I really don't want to, continue to wet it down every day. Otherwise, I'm going to have a lot of mushrooms, and especially if he has some history of white mold. But it's a tough deal because the conditions that are great for crop production, unfortunately, are also great for white mold and many other diseases.
And it's similar with water, just like you were talking with him about row spacing and plant population. There are pros and cons with that management practice, and there are pros and cons to your water management practice, whether you're adding short spurts frequently or taking a deep watering approach.
Yeah, yep. All right, so what else would you like to talk about today, Mike? What kind of questions are you getting from farmers and agronomists this summer about irrigation?
We see a lot of guys that kind of want to know, when do I turn my water on? How do I know when it's time to water? And we kind of touched on that. We kind of touched on that with your previous questions. And a lot of times the answer from the grower is, I saw my neighbor watering, so I figured I better turn mine on too.
Yeah, but let's get more scientific with that. I mean, what do you think about moisture probes? Or, what method should a guy be using?
He's got to use the method that is going to be comfortable for him in terms of his ability to understand what's going on in the soil profile and with his plant development. So thinking about where your plant is in your development, how deep your roots are, what your soil type is, and what the use is on that plant. Let's take a look at corn, for instance. In early development, emergence through V4, that plant's got to have shallow roots, but it only really needs 1/10 of an inch of moisture a day. So considering how deep those roots might or might not be when your next rainfall event, you can consider how much irrigation you want to need versus into silking and tasseling and silking. You're going to need more than 3 times that amount of water, but you're going to have a deeper root depth. So monitoring that soil profile through whatever method, either a manual method with a soil profile and pulling a core, or a more electronic method with a soil moisture sensor that is going to be able to tell you what your moisture is at those depths, and then manage that accordingly, especially with a rainfall forecast.
Okay, a lot of guys that we work with, they farm ground that, let's say, is 10, 20, 30 miles away from home, and I see them all the time on their phones, and they have the app looking at, all right, here's where my pivot's at, I can turn it on, turn it off, all that that kind of thing. How comfortable are you with these moisture probes that we can start doing this kind of remotely, where we don't necessarily have to be in the field every single time, and we can say, ooh, my moisture probe doesn't look good, I better get that pivot running again?
Moisture probes are like any other piece of equipment that we have on the farm. The better we take care of them, the better they service us. And there is a misconception that I put it in the ground and I leave it alone, and
Yep.
that's not necessarily the case. They do require some maintenance. So if your grower is maintaining that moisture probe per the manufacturer's recommendation, done a quality installation on that moisture probe, and knows that he's getting good data out of that, then it's going to provide him quality information about where the moisture is in the soil. And as long as he's monitoring his plant development and rooting depth, he can make a good decision about whether or not an irrigation is needed, irrigation cycle is needed. And we can't forget our rain forecasting. If rain's forecast in the 24 to 48 hours, do I need to make the cash investment in fuel or energy to run a pump and a pivot versus a natural rainfall?
Yep. All right. I agree. All right. That has been Mike Mills with Renke. Mike, thanks a lot for the time today. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Anytime.